Some space mysteries sound so bizarre, so cinematic, that they almost feel made up. Strange signals from the sky, dark objects drifting in orbit, stars dimming for no obvious reason, sounds in space that nobody was supposed to hear. And for years, people looked at stories like these and thought the same thing: aliens. But the truth is, what really happened is often just as unsettling and sometimes even stranger. Let's start with one of the most famous space legends ever told, the Black Knight satellite. Back in 1899, Nikola Tesla was running radio experiments when he picked up a signal that genuinely disturbed him. It was rhythmic, repeating, too organized to sound random. Tesla believed it might be coming from an intelligent source beyond Earth, and he even wondered if Mars was trying to reach us. That moment became the seed of the Black Knight story. According to the legend, a mysterious object of extraterrestrial origin has been orbiting Earth for 13,000 years. It supposedly follows a near-polar orbit, giving it a path over nearly every part of the planet. And that's what makes the story so creepy. If it were true, this thing would have been watching us long before humans even knew how to leave the ground. Then the mystery got bigger. In the 1920s, amateur radio operators started picking up what became known as long-delayed echoes. They would send out a signal, then hear it bounce back several seconds later, way too late to be explained by a normal reflection from the atmosphere. Then in 1973, Scottish writer Duncan Lunan took those strange echoes and tried to map them. What he came up with looked, at least to him, like a star chart pointing to Epsilon Boötis. His conclusion was wild. Maybe the signals were coming from an ancient alien probe parked near the moon thousands of years ago. By the Cold War, the story was already spiraling. In the 1950s and 60s, newspapers reported that the US Navy had detected a dark object in orbit. That rattled people because neither the United States nor the Soviet Union claimed it. And then in 1998, the crew of Space Shuttle Endeavour photographed a black, twisted-looking object floating above Earth. For a lot of people, that was it. Case closed. The Black Knight was real. Except, it wasn't. The truth is, the Black Knight legend is really a pile of unrelated stories that got stitched together into one giant myth. Tesla was probably hearing natural signals, possibly from pulsars, or maybe just radio interference from Earth. Duncan Lunan later admitted he had made serious mistakes in his star map and withdrew the theory entirely. The dark object seen in the 1960s turned out to be debris from a lost Air Force satellite. And that famous photo from 1998? Not an alien craft, not even close. It was just a thermal blanket that astronaut Jerry Ross accidentally let go of during a spacewalk. And honestly, that might be the most unsettling part of all. Sometimes a legend doesn't come from one big mystery, it comes from a dozen little ones getting mixed together until they feel real. But Black Knight isn't the only story like that. In 2003, during his first solo mission in space, Chinese astronaut Yang Liwei heard something that would have made almost anyone freeze. A knocking sound. Sharp, clear, metallic. He said it sounded like someone tapping the hull with a wooden hammer. He stopped and listened. The sound was real enough to shake him, but he couldn't figure out where it was coming from. Inside the capsule? Outside? He looked out the window and saw nothing. When he returned to Earth, he tried to recreate the sound for engineers, but couldn't do it. And it didn't end with him. Similar knocking was later reported on both Shenzhou 6 and Shenzhou 7. Same mystery, same uncertainty, no clear answer. Over time, Yang even started warning later astronauts about it so they wouldn't panic if they heard it too. There are a few possible explanations. The spacecraft could have been expanding and contracting as it moved through extreme temperature swings. It could have been vibrations from onboard systems or tiny mechanical stresses traveling through the hull and becoming amplified inside the cabin. But as of now, there still isn't a fully confirmed explanation. And then there's a mystery much farther from home. Over 1,470 light-years away, there's a star that completely broke the pattern astronomers were used to. It's called Tabby's star, and at one point it became so baffling that people nicknamed it the WTF star. Normally, when astronomers look for planets, they watch for tiny dips in a star's brightness. A planet passes in front, the light drops a little, and that's your clue. even a giant planet like Jupiter would only block about 1% of the star's light. But Tabby's star didn't dim by 1%, it dropped by as much as 22%. That's not a planet, that's something huge. Whatever was blocking that light had to be enormous, and it got even weirder because the dimming wasn't regular. Planets are predictable, they orbit like clockwork, but this star faded in messy, uneven bursts. Then in 2017, after a long quiet stretch, it started dimming again in strange events with names like Elsie, Celeste, and Skara Bra. It didn't look neat, it didn't look natural, it looked like chaos. And that's when one of the boldest ideas in astronomy entered the chat. What if this wasn't natural at all? What if we were looking at an alien megastructure? More specifically, people started talking about a Dyson swarm, a vast system of orbiting structures built to collect a star's energy. In other words, maybe we were watching a civilization build around its own sun. It sounds insane, but for a while it was taken seriously enough that SETI pointed radio telescopes at the star to listen for signals, while others searched for lasers that might hint at intelligent activity. And if it wasn't aliens, the alternatives weren't exactly comforting either. Maybe a planet had been ripped apart. Maybe shattered debris and broken moons were circling the star. Maybe a swarm of disintegrating comets was drifting through and choking off the light. Then the data gave the whole mystery a twist. Scientists found that during the dimming events, blue light was being blocked more than red light. That matters because if some giant solid megastructure were doing the blocking, it should dim all colors more or less equally. But that wasn't happening, which meant the thing causing the dimming probably wasn't a giant solid object at all. It was more likely dust, a huge uneven cloud of fine dust, maybe from shattered comets or a destroyed moon, drifting around the star like a dirty veil. Still eerie, still dramatic, just not alien architecture. At least, probably not. Now imagine you're walking through a dark valley in rural Norway. No city glow, no traffic, just silence. And then, out of nowhere, a bright orb appears in the air. It isn't a plane, it isn't a star, it doesn't move the way anything familiar should. Sometimes it hangs there, almost like it's watching. Other times it streaks across the sky with impossible speed. Those are the Hessdalen lights. People have been reporting them in Norway's Hessdalen Valley since the 1930s, but things got especially intense between 1981 and 1984. During that stretch, these lights were showing up as often as 20 times a week. It became such a phenomenon that tourists started traveling there just to spend the night and hope they'd see one. Eventually, scientists had to get involved, and in the late 1990s, students and engineers recorded something even stranger, a glowing pyramid-shaped object moving up and down in the darkness. Later, they set up an automated station to monitor the valley around the clock. Over the years, a few explanations have been suggested. One is that the valley behaves like a giant natural battery. The slopes on either side act like opposite poles, while the river below acts like a conductive path. Rising gas bubbles could become electrically charged and glow. Another theory points to dust from old mining activity. Some researchers think certain chemical compounds in that dust might ignite in the air, creating floating balls of light. But despite years of observation, there still isn't a fully confirmed answer. And that uncertainty is exactly what keeps the mystery alive. Another case that feels almost surreal is the so-called glowing jellyfish UFO. On September 20th, 1977, in Petrozovsk, witnesses saw a bright object flare in the night sky and send thin beams of light downward like glowing threads. Then the whole thing spread outward into a shape people described as a jellyfish. After that, the rays stopped, the shape turned into a bright semicircle and drifted away. The display reportedly lasted for around 10 to 15 minutes. And it wasn't just one city. Reports came from a huge area stretching from northern Europe all the way to the Soviet Far East. Witnesses included police officers, medical workers, military personnel, airport staff, and even amateur astronomers. By the end of 1978, Soviet researchers had collected 85 reports, some with drawings. There were even sightings from aircraft. One Tu-134 crew reported a glowing sphere at around 7.5 miles altitude.
Passengers on another flight said they watched a bright object for nearly half an hour. Then came the follow-up claims: strange glow over water, unusual plant and water activity, electronic devices acting up, then returning to normal. At that point, governments started paying attention. Officials in Northern Europe contacted the Soviet Academy of Sciences to ask whether the phenomenon might be related to weapons testing and if it posed any environmental danger. Inside the USSR, even the preliminary conclusion was uneasy. There simply wasn't enough information to explain it properly. Over time, several explanations were proposed: a meteor, auroral activity. Later, the most common explanation became the launch of the Soviet satellite Cosmos 955 from Plesetsk, with high-altitude plume effects creating the jellyfish-like appearance when viewed from the right angle. And to be fair, similar space jellyfish effects have been seen